Have you ever found yourself in an argument, just wishing you had the magic words to win? Well, today, we're diving into some powerful, battle-tested strategies from master debater Mehdi Hasan on how to do just that.
So let's just forget about those little arguments over the dinner table for a second. Let's start with some really high stakes. I mean, what would you do if an entire city, tens of thousands of lives, were hanging on your ability to persuade someone?
And this isn't just some hypothetical, right? This actually happened way back in 428 BCE. A city called Mytilene revolted against Athens. And the Athenian response? It was swift and it was brutal. They decided to execute every single man and enslave all the women and children. A ship was already on its way to do the deed. But then, overnight, something shifted. Maybe it was a pang of conscience? Who knows? But the very next morning, they decided to have a new debate.
So you've got two main players here. On one side, there's Cleon, who is known as the most violent man at Athens. He's just channeling all that rage, arguing for punishment and death. But then, Diodotus steps up, and he warns them, hey, haste and passion are the enemies of good decisions. But here's the brilliant part. He wasn't just using logic, he completely reframed the argument. It wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about what was best for Athens.
And guess what? It worked. Diodotus's argument completely turned the tide. They sent a second ship, racing to catch the first one, and it got there just in the nick of time to stop the massacre. The city was saved. So how on earth did he pull that off? Well, this incredible story gives us our first major lesson in the art of persuasion.
And here it is. This is the big takeaway. Now, you might be thinking, wait a minute, didn't Diodotus argue against passion? And yeah, he did. But he wasn't arguing against emotion. He understood this fundamental truth. Winning an argument is so often not about having the most facts. It's about connecting with feelings.
You know, Dale Carnegie absolutely nailed this years later. He said, "We're not dealing with creatures of logic. We're dealing with creatures of emotion." And let's be honest, our feelings, they rarely give a hoot about our fact.
The ancient Greeks actually had words for this. There's logos, which is your appeal to the head, logic, data, all that stuff. And then there's pathos, the appeal to the heart, using stories and feelings. Now, they're both tools in your toolbox, but the source material for this explainer argues that one of them is way, way more powerful.
If you want to really see pathos in action, just think about this. Instead of listing statistics about a famine, the author tells the specific, gut-wrenching story of a 7-year-old girl named Amal Hussein who starved to death. That one single story, her story, it hit you with an emotional force that a million data points never could.
So just how powerful is it? Well, the book makes a really bold claim that in a straight fight, an appeal to the heart, pathos, will beat an appeal to pure logic 9 times out of 10. The lesson is clear. If you really want to persuade someone, you have to make them feel something.
Okay, so emotion is your superpower, but it's not everything. What happens when your opponent just flat out denies a fact? What do you do then? For that, you need your second tool. You need receipts. And no, we're not talking about the kind you get at the grocery store. Think of receipts as your ultimate weapon of proof. They're that damning piece of factual evidence, a direct quote, a voting record, a past statement that you can pull out in the middle of a debate and just leave your opponent with absolutely nowhere to hide.
Here's a perfect example from a 2020 debate. Elizabeth Warren didn't just accuse Michael Bloomberg of being sexist. No, she used a receipt. She used his own reported words against him. That's a receipt in action. It's powerful stuff.
And here's another way to do it. When Dan Crenshaw questioned the source of some data, the response was just so simple and devastating. Just pull up the graph and say, those are CBP numbers, official source, end of argument. A good receipt can just stop a line of attack cold.
All right, let's talk about something a little controversial. A tactic that pretty much breaks every rule they teach you in debate club. We're always told, play the ball, not the man. But what if playing the man is actually a totally legitimate and really powerful move?
The book just throws this question out there from philosopher Tom Wyman, and it's a great one. If ad hominem arguments are illegitimate, how come they're so useful? It really makes you stop and think, doesn't it?
Is a personal attack always a cheap shot? Now, to be clear, this isn't about just flinging random insults. That's not it at all. These are targeted, strategic strikes against your opponent's credibility. Their ethos, as the Greeks called it. You might be pointing out their hypocrisy, a hidden bias, or a conflict of interest. You're challenging their character. And get this, even Aristotle said this was the most effective means of persuasion.
So, you've got your tools, right? Emotion, receipts, even a well-placed attack on your opponent's character. But honestly, none of that works without the final, and maybe most important piece of the puzzle: preparation.
I mean, think about the ancient Greek orator Demosthenes. The guy was considered the greatest speaker of his time, but he wasn't a natural. The stories say he used to practice speaking with pebbles in his mouth and would lock himself away for months just to perfect his delivery. It's a great reminder that greatness is forged, not born.
So what does that kind of prep look like for us? Well, first you do your homework. You research everything about your topic and your opponent. Then, and I love this, you steel-man their argument. You build the absolute strongest possible version of their case so you can find its real weaknesses. And finally, you rehearse, 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 and you visualize yourself succeeding before you even say a word.
There's a fantastic quote that says, "A speech is like a love affair. Any fool can start it, but to end it requires considerable skill." You now have the tools. You know how to connect with the heart, how to corner with facts, and how to prepare like a champion. So the only real question left is, are you ready to do the work to not just start the argument, but to win it?